Hi, I'm Mark Goldenberg. I'm here for Peghead Nation, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about this Kenny Hill performance guitar that I have. Kenny Hill's been making guitars for decades in Santa Cruz, California, and he is one of the few American classical guitar builders who does a kind of European-style guitar shop where he's the master builder and he has other people making his guitars with him, but it's a small shop, and he just makes really wonderful, playable, and very modern classical guitars. Some features on this guitar. This is called the performance model. This is the model that uses something called a double top, which we'll talk about. It has a traditional neck joint and build, so it does not have an elevated fingerboard, but it has some other quite modern features for a nylon string guitar. So let's talk about what we've got going on here. This is a traditional shaped classical guitar with Indian rosewood back and sides. It looks like it has a cedar top, which it does. It has cedar on the top, all finished in French polish, which is a very labor-intensive finish that they put on classical guitars. It's different than spraying lacquer. It's actually put on one coat at a time. It's very thin. It allows the guitar to really breathe and the sound to come out of the wood. It's the traditional method of choice for a high-end classical guitar. The top, this is called a double top guitar, which is basically slightly misleading because maybe it should be called a triple top. There's basically three pieces to this top. On the very top that you see is a very thin piece of cedar. Underneath, if you looked at the bottom of the top, you'd see another piece of wood, which is a very thin piece of spruce. In between these two very thin pieces of wood is a material called Nomex, which I believe is an aircraft material. It's very thin and very rigid. So he makes basically a sandwich out of these three pieces, the two pieces of wood and the Nomex in the middle, and you've got basically a very thin top that's extremely stiff. Also underneath this top is something called lattice bracing. There's different kinds of bracing that are used in classical guitars. Lattice bracing is what it sounds like. It's very thin strips of wood put together in a lattice fashion. These are relatively modern innovations in classical guitar technology. What it does is it gives the guitar much more rigidity and it pushes the sound out. But because Kenny's a fine player and attuned to the sound of the guitar, you're not just getting volume. You get all the sweetness, you get all the dynamic shading, you get everything that you would get from a traditional guitar, but you just get a little bit more oomph out of the guitar. Among other things that are modern on this guitar are a compensated nut and bridge. So here's the nut and the bridge, and you notice if you look close at the nut, you'll see that there's actually, it's not just like one piece, but there's a little notch where some of the strings are moving, probably the G string or B string. And the same on the bridge piece where there's the actual, the way the bridge is cut, it slightly changed the string length. So he can really, using this technology, you can really refine the intonation of the instrument. And when you play the guitar, you notice that it's very in tune sounding. And of course, it has new strings, so I don't know exactly how in tune it's going to be. But as you play up and down the neck, the intonation is really superb. The tuners are Goto, Japanese brand, really fine tuners. And, what else does it have? It has soundports. It's also a relatively new innovation for guitar. There's these two holes right there on the top of the guitar. They almost act like monitors for the player. So when I play on the guitar, I hear it coming out of the front, of course, but I also get a little bit something extra coming out towards me. So it's almost like I can hear a little bit more of what the audience might hear. Kenny thinks that the sound ports affect the entire tone of the guitar, which I believe is true. I'm not really a classical player. I've studied classical guitar, but I've played steel string acoustics and electrics. So when I was looking for a great classical guitar, there's a lot of options out there for people who don't play classical. Like you can get a narrower nut, for example. Shorter string scale are all available these days for classical guitar players. But I felt that the experience of playing the traditional classical guitar was great, and it didn't really bother me that the neck was a little bit wider. These tend to be wider in the 2-inch range compared to, let's say, like a steel string acoustic. And basically what I looked for in the tone of a nylon string guitar is the ability to get different shadings, which these guitars do, meaning that if I play here or I play here, I get some different tonalities. That's one thing that nylon string guitars have. They respond really well to where your hand is over the sound hole or by the bridge. There really are so many shadings available for the player. So that's one thing I was looking for, is a guitar that allowed me to have some different shadings. Of course, playability is the big factor for me, since the classical guitar is generally set up with the strings significantly higher than, let's say, what's available on an electric guitar or even a steel string acoustic. You can't really get these kind of strings down that low because they tend to they have a wide vibrational arc. So you don't want the strings so low because then you get string rattle and stuff. So I look for a guitar that's got at least string action that's low enough so that when I switch between steel string or electric and I go to classical, I don't have to spend a week kind of relearning how to play. And Kenny's guitars, he, for example, was able to bring the action down for me. It's still very clear at every note, but it's low enough for me to feel comfortable playing it. I'd never owned a cedar top before. I've always had spruce top guitars, and my current Collings is a mahogany top. In the classical world, I had a spruce top before, and it's a different sound when you have cedar on top. It's a little more, almost like you have a reverb built in or something. It's a little more inward, could I say? Every sound gets a little more blended. I think that's the term we like to use. Everything kind of gets homogenized, which is lovely. So I'm kind of enjoying this new take on the classical guitar.